Chicago, December 12, 2023, 5:45 p.m. The city was wrapped in a thick layer of snow, the sky a dull gray as the last light of day faded behind towering skyscrapers. Inside the 22nd floor of Coleman Financial Group, the atmosphere was no warmer. The soft hum of fluorescent lights and the distant tapping of keyboards were the only sounds that echoed through the nearly empty office. Emily Parker, a 34-year-old senior financial analyst, sat alone at her desk by the large window. Her usually sharp eyes looked tired after a grueling day of back-to-back meetings and endless spreadsheets. She let out a quiet sigh as she glanced at the clock, almost 6 p.m. Everyone else had already left for the day, eager to escape into the festive streets of Chicago preparing for the holidays. But for Emily, late nights were nothing new. Success had a price, and she was willing to pay it. As she packed up her laptop and organized the neatly stacked reports, her phone buzzed with a message from Mark, her boyfriend. "Long day? Can't wait to see you tonight." A small smile crept across Emily's face for the first time that day. She unlocked her phone and opened the camera roll. There, among screenshots of financial reports and meeting notes, was a picture she had taken earlier that week, a playful, private photo meant only for Mark's eyes. It was innocent in intention but intimate enough to raise eyebrows if seen by anyone else. Feeling a rare spark of spontaneity, she decided to send it. "Just a little something to make your evening better," she typed, followed by a wink emoji. Without thinking twice, she pressed send using the quick voice command she often used at work to save time. "Siri, send the last photo to Mark." But in that brief moment of distraction, her fingers nervously brushing a stack of papers, the unthinkable happened. Sending last photo, to Richard Cole. For a second, Emily didn't process what she had just heard. The words hung in the air like a bad joke. Slowly, she looked down at her phone screen, praying that Siri had misunderstood. But there it was. Clear. Inevitable. Sent to Richard Cole. Her breath caught in her throat. A cold wave of panic washed over her, sharper than the winter winds howling outside. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Her fingers trembled as she frantically opened the message app, hoping, absurdly, that she could somehow unsend it. But it was too late. Delivered. Seen. Emily's mind raced. No. No. This can't be happening. She had always been careful, always professional. She never mixed personal life with work, especially not in a company like this, where reputation was everything. And Richard Cole. Of all people, why him? Richard wasn't just any colleague. He was the vice president of finance, a man whose influence stretched far beyond his title. Charismatic on the surface but infamous for his predatory behavior behind closed doors, Richard was known among female employees for his subtle but persistent advances. HR complaints? They disappeared. Whispers in the break room? Silenced by fear and non-disclosure agreements. Emily had managed to stay off his radar for years by keeping her head down and letting her work speak for itself. But now, because of one careless moment, she had handed him exactly the kind of leverage he thrived on. Her stomach churned. She could already imagine the smug smile on his face as he opened that message. The way he'd lean back in his leather chair, fingers steepled, thinking of all the ways he could turn this to his advantage. She grabbed her coat with shaky hands, her mind spiraling through worst-case scenarios. Could she confront him? Pretend it was a joke? Blame it on a technical error? But deep down, she knew Richard too well. This wasn't a man who let opportunities slip through his fingers. As she stepped into the elevator, her reflection stared back at her, pale, anxious, and vulnerable. Not the composed, confident professional everyone saw in board meetings. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime, sealing her fate for the night. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. Richard Cole. Interesting choice of message, Emily. We should talk tomorrow. Her heart sank. Standing alone in the elevator descending into the cold streets of Chicago, Emily realized something chilling. This wasn't just a mistake. This was the beginning of a nightmare. And as the snow continued to fall outside, covering the city in deceptive white purity, Emily knew one thing for sure: tomorrow, nothing would be the same. The pale winter sunlight barely filtered through the thick blinds. Inside Richard Cole's office, the air was heavy, not with warmth, but with the chill of authority and hidden agendas. A steaming cup of coffee sat untouched on his polished desk. Richard leaned back in his leather chair, eyes glinting with amusement as he scrolled through his laptop. He looked like a man savoring the moment after cornering his prey. A soft knock on the door. "Come in, Emily." His voice was smooth, almost too inviting, like silk hiding a blade. Emily Parker stepped inside, her posture straight, her expression composed, but her clenched fists betrayed the storm within. She'd spent a sleepless night hoping that Richard would dismiss the accidental message. But deep down, she knew better. Richard Cole wasn't the type to let something like this slip. Richard, looking up with a sly smile. "Well, Emily. I must say, I was quite surprised by the gift you sent me last night." His voice dripped with sarcasm, every word carefully sharpened to cut deep. Emily held his gaze, forcing herself to stay calm. "It was a mistake, Mr. Cole. I trust you'll be professional enough to disregard it." Richard let out a dry chuckle, the sound echoing ominously in the quiet room. "Richard. Oh, I understand mistakes, Emily. We all make them. But, some mistakes, if they reach the wrong ears, can be hard to explain, don't you think?" He casually rotated his laptop toward her. There it was, the photo. The image she'd prayed would be forgotten stared back at her in high definition. Emily swallowed hard, her pride stinging more than any fear. "Richard," his voice dropping to a silky murmur. "But don't worry. I'm a very discreet man. As long as you know how to cooperate." There it was. The game had begun. Emily, through gritted teeth. "What do you want?" Richard leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk, savoring every second of control. "Richard. You're about to be nominated for the vice president position, aren't you? Quite the achievement after all these years." He paused, eyes gleaming as he watched her reaction, like a predator enjoying the panic of its prey. "Richard. But I'm afraid such a position requires someone with a spotless reputation. The board might not appreciate a candidate with questionable photos floating around." Emily felt heat rise to her face, not from embarrassment, but from anger she struggled to contain. Richard continued, his tone as casual as discussing quarterly profits. "So, here's the deal. You'll decline the nomination. Simply say you're not ready for the responsibility." He smiled, as if offering her a favor. "Emily. Is that all?" Richard, grinning wider. "One more thing. You'll adjust the financial report for this quarter. It appears Mr. David Miller has been misplacing some company funds." Emily's stomach dropped. David Miller, her mentor, one of the few honest men left in this cutthroat corporate world. Emily, coldly. "You want me to frame him for embezzlement?" Richard shrugged, as if accusing a man of fraud was just another task on the agenda. "Richard. I wouldn't call it framing. I'd call it protecting your future. Let's be honest, Emily, everyone bends the rules to survive here. Being too righteous only gets you pushed out faster." The room felt smaller, suffocating. Emily could feel the walls closing in, the weight of Richard's words pressing down on her. One careless click, and now her career, her dignity, her years of hard work, all hung by a thread held in Richard's hand. "Richard," voice low, icy. "If you refuse, well, I'm sure this photo will spark quite the conversation around the office." You know how fast rumors spread. His smirk was the final twist of the knife. Emily stood frozen for a moment, swallowing the bitter taste of helplessness. She had spent years building her name, her reputation, now reduced to a bargaining chip in a game she never agreed to play. Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked out, the door clicking shut behind her like the closing bars of a cage. The hallway stretched ahead, cold and silent. Her footsteps echoed, each step heavier than the last. Emily knew one thing: tomorrow, she would face a choice. Bow down and protect everything she had built. Or stand up, risk losing it all, and hold on to something far more valuable, her integrity. Chicago, 2 a.m. The city outside was blanketed in silence, broken only by the occasional gust of wind swirling snow under the dim glow of streetlights. From the window of a modest apartment on the north side, Emily Parker sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the empty streets below. The faint hum of a heater filled the room, but it did little to chase away the cold that gripped her, not from the winter chill, but from the weight pressing on her chest. On the coffee table in front of her, Richard Cole's words echoed in her mind, as if they were carved into the silence. Protect your future. Everyone does it. Just bend a little. Her phone lay face down beside her, as if turning it over could somehow erase the messages she wished she'd never received. The photo. The threat. The deal. She had replayed the conversation 100 times since leaving his office. Every scenario, every excuse, every possible way out. But no matter how many mental paths she walked down, they all led to the same two doors: compromise or confrontation. Her career was everything she had worked for. 14 years in finance. Late nights. Missed birthdays. Failed relationships. All sacrificed to climb higher in a world where women like her had to fight twice as hard for half the recognition. And now, after all that, the vice president's seat was within reach. If she agreed to Richard's terms, no one would ever know. She'd walk into that boardroom next week, untouchable. Her reputation intact. Her future secured. It would be easy. Just one lie. Just one report altered. Just one innocent man's life destroyed. Her gaze drifted to the framed photo on the shelf, a younger Emily, fresh out of college, standing proudly in front of the Coleman Financial Building, her eyes full of ambition and belief that hard work and integrity were the keys to success. What would that version of herself think now? A bitter smile tugged at her lips. She could almost hear the voice in her head. Is this what you wanted, Emily? To reach the top, even if it means stepping over the truth? Her stomach twisted at the thought of David Miller, a man who had always treated her with respect, who had mentored her when others dismissed her as just another junior analyst. David didn't deserve this. But in Richard's game, decency was a weakness, and loyalty was a liability. Emily ran her hands through her hair, frustration boiling beneath the surface. Why did it always come down to this? Why were people like Richard allowed to thrive while those who played fair were forced to choose between survival and sacrifice? Her laptop sat open across the room, the glowing screen displaying the financial report Richard wanted her to alter. The cursor blinked on the spreadsheet like a ticking clock, waiting for her decision. Narrator, calm, reflective voice. How many of us have stayed silent in the face of injustice, just to protect ourselves? And how many truly have the courage to risk everything for the sake of truth? Emily closed her eyes, leaning back against the couch. The questions weighed heavily, more than any number she'd ever balanced on a ledger. She thought about what would happen if she defied Richard. The photo would spread. Whispers in the office. The looks. The judgment, not on Richard, but on her, because that's how these stories always played out. The promotion? Gone. Her reputation? Tarnished, perhaps forever. But if she gave in, would she ever be able to look at herself again without feeling disgust? The clock ticked past 2:30 a.m. Her reflection in the dark window stared back at her, tired, uncertain, afraid. But beneath the fear, there was something else. A flicker of resolve, buried under layers of doubt. Emily stood up slowly and walked over to her desk. She closed the laptop with a quiet snap and took a deep breath. There were moments in life when a person was defined, not by success, not by titles, but by the choices they made when no one was watching. This was her moment. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Richard. "Remember, Emily, smart people know when to play along. I'll expect your confirmation in the morning." Emily stared at the message for a long time. Then, calmly, she placed the phone aside. She didn't need until morning to decide. As the first hints of dawn crept over the Chicago skyline, Emily sat down at her desk, not to alter the report, but to draft something else entirely. A statement of truth. She knew the storm that would come. She knew what she stood to lose. But for the first time in hours, she felt free. 9 a.m., 20th floor, boardroom, Chicago headquarters. The polished glass doors of the boardroom reflected the towering skyline behind Emily Parker as she stood for a brief moment, steadying her breath. The weight of the early morning felt heavier than usual, not because of fatigue, but because of what she was about to do. Inside, the room was a sea of dark suits and cold eyes. The board of directors sat in their usual positions, stoic, unreadable. At the far end of the table, Richard Cole lounged comfortably in his chair, his trademark smirk playing at the corner of his lips. To his left sat David Miller, unaware that his career had been hanging by a thread all night. Emily walked in with calm precision, heels clicking against the marble floor. On the outside, she was every bit the composed professional they expected. But beneath that veneer, her heart pounded, not with fear anymore, but with determination. "Miss Parker, you're up," one of the board members announced, gesturing toward the screen where her financial report was ready to be presented. Emily nodded, moving to the head of the room where the clicker awaited her. She glanced briefly at Richard. He gave her a subtle nod, a silent reminder of the threat lingering over her head. His eyes said it all: play along, or pay the price. But Emily had made her choice long before stepping into this room. She clicked to the first slide of the presentation. Numbers. Graphs. Projections. Everything they expected to see. The kind of report that could make or break a quarter, or a career. The room fell silent as everyone focused on her. And then, she stopped. Emily set the clicker down on the table, her hands steady. She looked directly at the board, not at Richard, not at David, but at the people who held power over both justice and politics within these walls. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Emily," firm, unwavering. "Before I proceed, there's something I need to address." A ripple of confusion crossed the faces around the table. Richard shifted in his seat, his smirk fading ever so slightly. "Emily. I've been asked to alter this report. Not for the benefit of the company, but to serve a personal agenda." Now, every eye in the room was locked on her. The tension was palpable. Emily, taking a breath, then speaking louder. "I was blackmailed into falsifying data to frame Mr. David Miller for embezzlement." A murmur spread through the room like wildfire. David's head snapped toward her in shock, while Richard's expression darkened instantly. Richard, voice sharp, defensive. "Emily, what exactly do you think you're doing?" Emily didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her folder and calmly placed her phone on the table. "Emily. I think I'm telling the truth." With a single tap, she played the recording. Richard's voice filled the boardroom, smooth, sinister, undeniable. "Decline the promotion. Adjust the numbers. Protect your future." The words echoed off the sterile walls, each sentence stripping away Richard's facade layer by layer. When the recording ended, silence reclaimed the room. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This was heavier, charged with realization, with judgment. Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Richard, angry, grasping for control. This is absurd. She's twisting my words, this is out of context. But no one looked convinced. The board members exchanged glances, their once indifferent faces now etched with concern, and something Richard rarely encountered, disapproval. David Miller, still processing what he'd heard, finally spoke, his voice calm but edged with betrayal. David. How long have you been planning this, Richard? Richard ignored him, focusing solely on damage control, but it was clear, there was no escape from the evidence. One of the senior board members leaned forward, clearing his throat. Mr. Cole, we will be reviewing this matter immediately. For now, you're relieved of your duties until further notice. The words hit the room like a gavel striking down. Richard's face twisted in fury, but he knew better than to argue further. Without another word, he stormed out of the room, his departure as loud as his downfall. Emily stood quietly, her heart still racing but her posture unbroken. She could feel the eyes on her, not of judgment, but of something else. Respect? Perhaps. Or maybe just surprise that someone had dared to expose the rot within. The boardroom remained silent for a moment longer before the chairman finally spoke. Miss Parker, this was a bold move. There will be consequences, you know that. Emily met his gaze, her voice steady. Emily. I'm aware. But some things are worth more than a title. David offered her a nod, one of gratitude and admiration. As the meeting adjourned, Emily gathered her things, knowing full well that the hardest part was yet to come. The whispers would start. The rumors would spread. Her career at Coleman Financial was effectively over, even if no one said it out loud. But as she walked out of that glass room and into the open hallway, she felt lighter than she had in days. For the first time, she wasn't carrying the weight of fear. She was carrying the weight of truth, and that, she could live with. The news spread through Coleman Financial faster than wildfire. By noon, everyone knew that Richard Cole, the untouchable vice president, had been suspended indefinitely. The whispers echoed through every corridor, every break room, every hurried exchange by the elevators. But while Richard's downfall was the headline, Emily Parker became the story everyone couldn't stop talking about. Some called her brave. Some called her reckless. Most didn't say anything to her face, but the glances, the murmurs as she passed by, spoke louder than words ever could. As Emily walked through the office that afternoon, collecting the last of her files, she could feel the weight of every stare. Not of admiration, but of curiosity, judgment, and something colder, fear. Fear that she had broken an unspoken rule: you don't challenge power and walk away unscathed. No one offered congratulations. No one offered sympathy either. Because in places like this, survival depended on silence, and Emily had shattered that silence. She returned to her desk, the same one where, just days ago, she was preparing for a future that now seemed like a distant memory. Her nameplate gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a symbol of years of dedication. But Emily knew it no longer belonged to her. A soft knock at her cubicle broke her thoughts. It was David Miller. His usual confident demeanor was replaced with something more subdued, a quiet gratitude mixed with concern. David. I heard you're leaving. Emily nodded, offering a faint smile. Emily. There's no place for me here anymore, David. We both know that. David hesitated, searching for words. David. You did the right thing. Not many would have. Emily's smile faltered slightly, her eyes reflecting the exhaustion of someone who understood that doing the right thing didn't always come with applause. Emily. Doing the right thing doesn't pay the bills, or erase reputations. David's jaw tightened. He knew she was right. Even with Richard gone, Emily would forever be that woman, the one who exposed a scandal, the one who aired the company's dirty laundry. David. If you need a reference, or anything. Emily, cutting in gently. Thank you, but I think it's time I start over. Somewhere my name isn't a cautionary tale. David extended his hand, and Emily shook it firmly, a silent agreement between two people who understood the true cost of integrity. As he walked away, Emily took a final look around. The office felt different now, not hostile, but hollow. She realized that she had outgrown this place long before today. It just took a crisis to make her see it clearly. She packed her last box, placing the photo of her younger self on top, the same photo she had stared at during her sleepless night. The girl in that picture believed in hard work, fairness, and rising through merit. And despite everything, Emily was proud she hadn't betrayed that belief. When she reached the lobby, the receptionist barely met her gaze. A few colleagues offered tight-lipped nods, but most avoided eye contact altogether. No farewell party. No thank you emails. Just a quiet exit, the kind reserved for those who dared to disturb the status quo. Outside, the wind bit at her face as snowflakes drifted lazily from the gray Chicago sky. Emily stood for a moment, breathing in the cold air, watching as people rushed past her, heads down, minds occupied with meetings and deadlines that no longer concerned her. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. An email. Subject, interview invitation, Preston & Co. Financial Consulting. A small, genuine smile curved her lips. Word had traveled fast, but not all whispers were bad. Some doors were already opening. She started walking, her footsteps steady against the snowy pavement. Each step away from Coleman Financial felt lighter, as if she was shedding the invisible chains that had bound her to a world where silence was currency. Narrator, calm, reflective tone. Justice isn't free. It demands a price, sometimes your comfort, sometimes your reputation. But when faced with a choice between keeping peace or standing for what's right, the question isn't what you'll lose. It's what you're willing to live with. As Emily crossed the street, blending into the rhythm of a city that never paused for anyone's personal battles, she didn't know exactly where her path would lead. But for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid of the unknown. She had chosen truth over convenience. Integrity over ambition. And while that choice came with scars, it also came with freedom. Her story wasn't over. It was just beginning, on her own terms. The late afternoon sky over Chicago was painted in shades of gray and gold as the sun struggled to break through the heavy clouds. A biting wind swept through the streets, carrying with it the scent of snow and the hum of a city that never truly stopped. Emily Parker stood at the foot of the towering glass building that had, for years, been both her battleground and her prison. She took a deep breath, letting the crisp, cold air fill her lungs, a simple act that felt like reclaiming a part of herself. No security badge weighed down her coat pocket anymore. No deadlines or office politics clouded her mind. What remained was a quiet sense of clarity, and a future unwritten. Her phone buzzed in her hand, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced down. "You're invited, interview opportunity at Langston & Burke Consulting." A soft smile formed on her lips. It wasn't just a job offer, it was proof that standing up for what's right didn't mean the end. Sometimes, it meant a different beginning. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and looked at her reflection in the building's glass doors one last time. The woman staring back wasn't the same person who had walked into that boardroom days ago, burdened by fear and doubt. Now, she saw strength. Not because she won without sacrifice, but because she chose integrity over comfort. As Emily turned and walked down the busy street, blending into the flow of people chasing their own ambitions, a quiet voice echoed over the scene. "There are things more valuable than a career. It's when you can look in the mirror and feel no shame for the choices you made. Because in the end, titles fade, money comes and goes. But living with your truth? That's freedom no one can take away." The screen slowly fades to black, leaving only the question lingering, a challenge not just for Emily, but for everyone watching. If you were Emily Parker, would you have the courage to risk everything to protect the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Soft, inspiring music rises as the final message appears on screen. If this story made you reflect on courage, integrity, and the choices we face in life, don't forget to like and subscribe. Join us as we continue to explore real stories of morality, tough decisions, and the strength it takes to stand alone when it matters most. Thank you for watching. This ending leaves the audience with a sense of closure, but also encourages deep reflection, exactly what resonates with mature viewers who appreciate stories about ethics, resilience, and personal values. Would you like me to suggest specific background music, narration tone, or visual transitions to enhance this ending for video production?